And I got to tell you, with these agents, I am feeling that same pre-Docker pain. I believe we are in the moment before some new standard, a standard that is focused on the same type of portabilization, modularization of these agent systems. I'm very worried about AI and how it's going to impact our world. Hey, how's it going?
All right, good morning, everyone.
Oh my God, we got a good turnout. This is great. I'm seeing some very cool, particularly cool people here. You guys, thanks so much for coming. And Ashley, I think this is going to be so fun. And I was thinking, like, honestly, have some stuff to show off. And I think it'll be cool to talk about some of what we've been doing. But also, I feel like it's been such a cool energy working together on Sundays. So I was thinking we should just slip into that and kind of have fun talking about agents a little bit. So maybe you could kind of like walk us into the story so far. Like, how did we start kind of this collaboration?
Sure. Yeah, so we were introduced through Tali, is Tali here? But she's building an accelerator with the help of Stanley and some others. And so Tali introduced me to Stanley because I'd had a conversation with her around wanting to leverage AI for my business because it's one of the businesses that's ripe for innovation. I knew nothing or very little. I mean, we had used ChatGPT where we could on the HR side where it was obvious, but stepping into Stanley's world, into Science Sundays, has just been such a joy. The energy in the room. I see a number of you here that have been coming. But I'm curious in the room, how many of you are deep into AI building agents right now? I would guess, yeah, probably, half the room? How many of you don't even know what an AI agent is? Have never heard the term? I can say I wasn't, many weeks ago, but all right, great.
Oh, thank you. That was just incredible and all accurate. And then definitely got to shout out Tali. And yeah, we should say what an AI agent is and probably a bunch of other context stuff. But one thing that I'll say to start is, have this goofy thing where I introduce myself as your friendly neighborhood AI scientist. And I'm pretty friendly. I live in the neighborhood and I am an AI scientist. But that's not why I'm saying that. I am saying that because I'm very worried about AI and how it's going to impact our world. I think that we have a big choice in how it impacts our world, and sometimes I think you got to start with a little positivity, and not to be sort of unrealistic, but I do think it's very fun to talk about these technologies in the hope that we will get a chance to guide how they're applied and be part of deciding how they're used. And in that direction, there's actually some really good news about AI agents, which is, as a machine learning engineer, I cannot build an AI agent on myself. In this case, for example, needed Ashley, who had a problem, needed Tali, who is a remarkable business thinker. I mean, that was quite incredible when you guys went through your whole process, right? And then she sort of really identified a couple points in your business. Can you tell us about that process, maybe?
Sure. Yeah. So I think the first step was just documenting and that process, that step itself was incredibly valuable and is what we continue to do, documenting in Lucid app or whatever app you're using for building flowcharts, and then transitioning that over to N8N and actually starting all the credentialing, starting to actually figure out where do we want to put the AI agent in the process, is what we've been working on and having fun with on Sundays.
Yeah, and you mentioned N8N. I probably should at least put that up so we know what we're talking about. But yeah, it's so interesting because it is kind of we are kind of trying to take things that people do and figure out which things people are doing that people don't need to be doing, and then sort of reverse engineer the human cognitive process into something that a machine can think through. Man, how cool is that? That is becoming possible. But it is kind of an interesting process, right? Because it involves some engineering thinking. It involves, obviously your thinking as a person who's doing stuff, and then maybe some thinking from an operational leader. And what's really exciting about this particular moment is the game plan for doing this, for putting together the right combination of a person who needs agents, a person who understands process, and a person who can build machine learning systems. But the people with those skills, but also those people who can work together and talk to each other. Thank you, sir. New set of procedures, new game plan. And I'll tell you, it reminds me of a moment in my life when I was growing up in Palo Alto in the 90s. And I do remember all of a sudden everyone was talking about HTML. This would have been the pets.com era, right? When everyone knew they needed a website, but they weren't quite sure why or what it was going to do for them. And yeah, I think we're in that moment for agents right now. We're in this moment where everyone wants an agent, everyone wants to be talking about agents and building agents. Exactly the role agents are going to play is not 100% clear. But yeah, very, very exciting moment, right? Very exciting story to be a part of. Anyone heard of a group called Y Combinator? Yeah, they're pretty cool. I like those guys. Y Combinator, there's some kind of rumors that are circulating in the venture community about the current Y Combinator cohort. Apparently, Y Combinator has put together a team that is doing what we're doing. I would actually say that hearing about this was what inspired our collaboration. What's happening specifically is when a YC company, what I hear, reaches a place where they will be hiring or they will be making a large expenditure, they first have to talk to the agent team. And the agent team evaluates the expenditure and figures out whether there's an agentic solution. We'll know more in a few months, but the rumors are that the companies that are following this pattern are hitting milestones 50% faster for 10% of the expenditure.
That's significant.
It's very significant. It's a very early moment, and I do think we have a lot to learn about how these things work, how you really create sort of an agentic company. But if that's even half true, next year, accelerators will have agent labs.
So, yeah, Stanley, I'm curious, could you tell me about how you started Science Sundays here at the Kin?
Yeah, very, very carefully, I would say to start, although I would say it's kind of fun. We've had in different incarnations a tech social coffee in Venice for over 15 years probably. Venice is such a wonderful, diverse community. I'm a Bay Area guy, and I do love the Bay Area, but I also find at LA much more diverse thoughts at the table. And so for these projects that are kind of specifically at the intersection of multiple different modes of human thought, I feel like LA is the place to be building agents and figuring out how we're going to be using agents. And then in its most recent incarnation, yeah, we've been doing this really cool meetup. Everyone's invited. Sunday, about noon in the coffee shop here we meet. And yeah, it's called Science Sunday. Sometimes we call it the Singularity Support Group. Increasingly, there's that element, right, where things are changing so fast, it's hard to keep up on. And I have to say, genuinely so helpful to me to have just a couple hours where I sit down with coffee and friendly conversation, and we can just be like, man, this locomotive's moving fast.
Yeah, the first time I showed up to Science Sunday, I came in and Stanley and a few others were talking about biofilms on NASA space stations, and the topics are diverse. So,
oh man, you're going to sidetrack me. Man, this one's so fun because when they put up the ISS, stuff started growing on the windows, the outside of the windows. So someone had to go up and set up a lab in space to figure out what that was. I think they actually just had a result that was kind of crazy. They found, because they now do this, they have a genetic sequencing system on the ISS, and they use it for all kinds of science. And they found something non-terrestrial, I think, recently on the ISS, they think. Anyway, another talk. But yeah, it's so fun though to talk about that topic, to talk about AI, to have like a little community. And then, yeah, I would even say like what we've been doing is, to me, the start of what I'm hoping will grow into a community-driven agentic AI lab, where we have an incredible group of founders, we have an incredible group of investors, and we have an incredible group of builders, and that's the recipe, right? So I'm so excited to be doing what we're doing, right? Like taking a founder, saying, what's the one thing you don't want to be doing if we could really take it off your plate? And then, yeah, working together to build that. And then, yeah, I want to get into a little bit more some of how we build that. I want to start by sharing a story. But yeah, this is something that I think everyone can get involved with. And I am going to pull up a little something that'll hopefully make it seem a little more approachable, just show you kind of the actual tools we're using. So I got my first kind of significant role, like leading machine learning projects. I think that was about like 15 or 16 years ago. It was right around when I moved here to Venice, and I was the principal machine learning scientist working on a platform called Falcon. Falcon was the platform that Google used to translate all of their language. So funny, that is not Google Translate. Google Translate actually hated us. It was a weird rivalry within the company. The reason why there was a rivalry there, though, was actually kind of interesting, and I probably would have agreed with the Google Translate team. They had this perspective that commercializing language had some like moral complexity because language is something we all create. So they thought that Google Translate is the method for monetizing language through AI, as it should be an open thing. And then what we were doing is like, this was before we had GPT. This was before we had Docker. Yeah, we had a network of human translators. So the system, Falcon, was a platform, international decentralized platform that kind of coordinated the work of about 100,000 language translators, like all over the world. I think our platform translated about 20% of the language that was translated at any given day, which was actually kind of a cool thing to see, like sort of bird's eye, how does the organism of language flow kind of thing. But then, yeah, it was so interesting because like as the machine learning scientist, I'm coming into this system where there's 100,000 laborers at the bottom of the org chart. They have managers, those managers have managers. There are KPIs. It is a very complex like organizational system. And then you kind of go, I'm going to start adding machine learning elements. So maybe I make a system that is going to suggest to a translator like what they should be translating, right? Anyone maybe rely on autocorrect a little too much? Like, it's so funny because there's some words that like I should have learned to spell by now, but I just know that I can spell them wrong and it'll fix it, right? So that was actually something we found, is like we built this autocorrect system that was actually too good. It sort of like caused the translators to pay less attention than you might expect they should. And I would say like the one thing that we learned to expect is that anytime we introduced a new machine learning technology to the system, there were unexpected effects. And so again, like I think this sort of set the vibe for how I think about sometimes this would be called a cybernetic system. We hear about cybernetics and that's like RoboCop and stuff, but we are all cyborgs, right? Like I see you on your phone there, sir. That's your organ. I'm just kidding. No, it was very mean of me to do that to you, brother. Thank you for letting me do that. But sincerely, though, like actually, if you look at a brain scan, our brains model our phones as though they were a part of our body, sincerely. And then, when you think about an organization where there's tons of people interacting, we're adding other minds. Like we are creating a cybernetic network of minds, and it's kind of cool, right?
Very cool. I think it's up.
And and then again, it's just like all this process of intelligence and sort of looking at intelligence as something that happens to information, that like in any process where intelligence is acting, you start with some information that's your input to the system, and it's transformed, and then it's transformed again, and it's transformed again. And it's kind of cool because like that is actually a paradigm you can use to describe any system, right? Like anything that a human does on some level, it looks like starting with some data or some understanding of the world and then, changing that, doing something to it. And as a data scientist, we have a name for these kind of things that are sort of like sequential processes of transformation. They're usually called DAGs, or like directed acyclic graphs. And the idea is it's a set of instructions, it's a recipe. And here's a recipe that we've been working on. And it's, to be honest, a quite simple recipe. And I think Ashley can maybe share what it is to do, what is the business use case, and there's a couple features that'll be kind of fun to talk about. But I would just say, like, outside of what this does and what we're going to do with it, this system is so cool because this is a fairly low-code system. Like, I promise you, everyone in this room, if we sat down for an hour, you could build agents on this system, N8N. It's kind of a graphical system. So we have the ability to click on each node, open up each node, see what it's doing. On the left, we have the data coming into the system. In the middle is the intelligence that is applied to the data in this step. So for example, here, we can say what prompt we want to use. And then that is the output. And then we're able to kind of string these nodes together. So seriously, it's kind of fun, right, Ashley? Because like you sort of did this, right? Like you took us through.
Yes, this is a very simple process. This is how do I get data from our financial system, QuickBooks Online in this case, into a Google Sheet? Should be very simple, right? It's not as simple as you would think, trying to do it without the help of the team here on Sundays. So I don't know, for anyone in the room who may not be an engineer or very steeped in AI already, who might just be a founder looking for ways to implement AI, and if you're not having a tech co-founder, basic things like this that you think should be simple, I've actually been thrilled to have the support, even just basic support from the team on Sundays to come up with the structure of how to think through where to input an AI agent, what actually can the AI agent do in the process. So, Stanley, I'll hand it back to you.
No, 100%. And then, there is some complexity, and there are like simpler tools. I do like N8N as kind of a midpoint for some reasons I'll share. But then, also has been so fun going through that process. Also have to shout out, he's not here, but my good bro Josh. It was so fun working with you guys. Like, I find Josh to be such a solid thinker and just sort of takes you through the steps so well. But yeah, so for this thing, like, let's say, let me know if I'm wrong here. So if I understand the business use case for this one, you're maybe working with a client who has financial documents in a number of different areas, right? And so there's a process you go through of pulling all that in and creating a unified work product. Is that
right? A monthly close process. So anyone who runs a business, you need financials at the end of the month to see how you did. And so we have to pull data from multiple systems, analyze that data, figure out what's wrong with it, correct it, reconcile it, and come up with a work product at the end, which is your fully reconciled financial statement each month. So that was the first process that we decided to start with, was how do we automate a lot of this so it's not an entire team having to analyze the data, but insert some AI agents.
Yeah, right? Because like we want we want people doing human stuff, not just kind of moving spreadsheets around. And then you can see, like, so we got a QuickBooks block right here. I got a QuickBooks block right here. And then the N8N system has this like really beautiful setup of like pre-configured nodes for like interacting with different systems. So the process we're building, and then again, like the process we're inviting you guys to, like, come join us Sunday with an idea for an agent. Let us like pair you with one of our nerds. We'll build it. It'll be fun. Is kind of like identifying, where your data starts and how to get it. So, we had to configure your system, right? Like we had to kind of do all your credentials so it could talk to stuff. And that was pretty annoying, wasn't it?
It was. It didn't have all the pre-built options that we wanted, so we had to figure out how to build them.
Yeah, but then that's the thing too, is it's kind of like you do it once, right? So it's worth building a procedure and a process and kind of going through it. But then so this would be pulling in the QuickBooks data right here, and then it would be passing to an AI, and then you can have multiple AIs process things. This is actually one of the really interesting design features, and it also kind of allows me to express something else about agents. Who's like managed a team here? lot of people with management experience. This is so similar to managing a team. And, on some level, this should look like an org chart or a process map. On some level, these are your AI employees. You're giving them instructions. You're observing what they do. You're giving corrections if it's needed. So I just think that it's like outside of the annoying parts of like putting in your credentials and like some of the kind of onboarding that we had to do, everyone here already has so much intelligence about how to build an agent, from your experience building agents with human minds, helping them accomplish goals. I think that is like very fun. And then the last thing to kind of get into here, or at least one very fun thing to get into, is this Slack node, right? Because who here feels like really excited about having an AI file your taxes, just like do it and not check it or anything? Does that sound really fun to everybody? I mean, that might be the system we're headed towards, though. Anyway, so it's like for many processes there are liabilities, and there's a need to engineer the process to prevent negative outcomes. Obviously, in finance and accounting, diligence, accuracy, pretty important, right?
And security.
And security. That's totally right. So, having a process where you have an understanding of the liabilities of your data, how your data is transforming the risks that accumulate, and then also where is the knowledge that is needed for the agent to run properly. So, right off the bat, ChatGPT or another LLM that is going to be like fed a spreadsheet, put the spreadsheet in a form, make it a work product consistent with the rest of your work product, probably not going to work super good. It's probably going to make mistakes. It's probably not going to work on the format really well. But what we can do is apply a technique called RLHF, which stands for reinforcement learning with human feedback. So this system here is set up so that when it generates a document, it actually messages someone from your team on Slack, right?
Right, and says thumbs up or thumbs down. Did this do what you wanted it to do or not?
Right, and then not only does that give us a check so that we can ensure as we're starting the agent, it doesn't do anything bad, but also it is a data set that accumulates that can be used to teach the model how to function properly. And so we won't know until we get there, but I'm going to just give you a guess. We will get about 20 questions from this system that will come to your team. And after about 20 questions, it's going to get things mostly right. We will probably go up to 100, and we will not sort of turn off the RLHF on a document by document basis until we're sort of like close to 95% or maybe 100% accuracy. I mean, that's something me and you will work out, like what are our KPIs. But yeah, at a certain point though, with these systems, they do become reliable. And it comes from this human in the loop process, which is really fun too, because it is almost like we're building a system to take what is in a human mind, like the memory and the knowledge in a human mind, and then transfer it into a system that we've built out of artificial minds. By representing the knowledge in the human mind through a data set, and then using that data set to create the memory of this AI agent.
As a founder, this is so incredibly powerful because you know how long it takes to onboard, train someone, get someone up to speed to do things the way that your company does. And then what happens? That person walks out the door and you lose all of that knowledge. Here you have it maintained. And I don't know, for me, that in itself is incredibly exciting.
Yeah, and I have to say it's a step towards being able to download Kung Fu, like in the Matrix. I'm really excited about that one. And I joke though, but it's kind of interesting. It's like this is the portabilization and the productization of knowledge as something that's commoditizable, tradable. So it's kind of fun for us too, because we're like thinking, at some point the white shoe accounting firms are going to be using these tools, right? And like we're exploring the patterns, and then the data set of an accountant looking at a generated document and going like, this is good, this isn't good. That's the value, that's the mode, that data right there. So it's so funny because it's just, I joke about, Sunday is the Singularity Support Group, and On an emotional level, but seriously, like on a knowledge acquisition level, it feels like there's new words every week, there's new paradigms. Also very funny, the pattern of things trickling out. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think maybe 6 months ago, like engineers were really talking about agents, and now agents are kind of spreading out to a broader audience. Anyone heard about something called an MCP? So this is, I think MCP is like kind of mid-cultural diffusion right now as a concept. And it's so funny too, because sometimes like, something will have an acronym that works for the engineers, but then it doesn't kind of permeate further until someone comes up with something catchy for it. Model Context Protocol, MCP, is like basically the grown-up version of what these things are. These extensions that let our agent talk to other systems. So like an MCP is sort of like an interface between agent and another system. So that's something you will be hearing in a couple months. They'll be on the news talking about MCPs, that kind of stuff. And then the one that is like just kind of hitting the top of that funnel right now is agentic memory, which if you Google agentic memory, you'll find stuff at this point that's like archive papers kind of thing. And agentic memory is this thing I'm talking about where you have this DAG, this network, this diagram, this process of transforming information. It's kind of based on attaching mines to each step in the process, but the mines are not where the value is, and the mines are not the key part of the function. For example, if we were to swap out Llama 3.3 for Llama 3.2, the performance would not change much. The models are not the biggest part of the performance. In fact, in many cases, once you have a working agent, you can switch the models out for smaller models, for less expensive models, and would even share that we have a partner who has free LLMs available for people building agents. Actually, incredibly cool company called LilyPad that supports a lot of my medical research, actually a decentralized network of people with GPUs who will make them available. So actually you can do a kind of thing where if you have an agent that is very high volume for your business and the cost basis isn't fully comfortable, you can kind of like stabilize the agent after you've built the agentic memory, switch out the big nodes for smaller nodes or free nodes on this LilyPad network. And then, it's kind of actually really cool because on Reddit, there's an incredibly active N8N community building these patterns, sharing them. We'll even say, like, actually, I have this one pattern I've been adjusting. Let me actually pull this up because it's so fun. It is a short story writing agent, and I've been using it to write sci-fi, which has been a lot of fun. So I'll pull that one up so we can kind of show what we're talking about here as these things get more complex. But yeah, there's this whole community of people building and sharing these agents, and not just that, but like optimizing their cost basis, right? Like you go on the subreddit and there's like hundreds of people who have launched consulting companies doing this work for different users. And then like, they're like, oh, how cheap can I get this, right? So sort of really interesting, just the direction of the economy of computing in this context. How fun is this too, man? Because you can kind of go through the whole thing, and anyone who's like ever been involved in creating media content, like I think this is a writer's room. Like this is legit a writer's room. Like, and you can even go through and look at the typical roles in a writer's room, and they kind of map to here. And there's things in here like storyboarding, and there's actually a specific agent that's tuned to create the storyboard. So like in this context of agentic memory, right, where like each of these nodes has like a different skill, corresponds to a different type of human intelligence. Like so cool, so interesting, right? Like this is a thing where you could kind of like, let's say there's a famous storyboarder. I don't know, people in Hollywood might know who that would be. But what if they tune a model like this so that they're like, oh, this is the AI I certify as like having my style of like narrative storytelling. And then, what if they make that available? Like same way that you download Kung Fu and The Matrix, like you download Steven Spielberg as your story writer, right? So anyway, punchline is agentic memory, agentic memory, agentic memory. This process we're going through is what I would describe us building an agentic memory system for your process, right? And we do that by kind of creating the tubes, pushing the water of information through the tubes and then sort of attaching the things to the pipe that we need so that the flow happens the way we want it to. Here's kind of like where my head's going and what's really exciting about this. When I mentioned I was principal at Google 15 years ago, and maybe mentioned also this was the pre-Docker era. People know what Docker is? So these kind of systems and the systems that I was like building at Google, we're talking like...
Stanley, do you want to explain really quick what Docker is?
Yeah,
For those
totally.
that
No,
aren't
I was just
familiar?
rolling into it. Yeah. So sometimes we would maybe need to, because like you hear about these things are trained on thousands, tens of thousands of GPUs, right? So how do you like set that up? Anyone get a new MacBook in the last month? Like how long did it take to set up your MacBook, right? Like how long would it take you to set up 10,000 computers that are like, in Wisconsin somewhere? So this is what we were like doing is we were trying to run like a machine learning system that was distributed over a couple thousand GPUs. And it was really hard. It was really painful and annoying. And it was like, we'd push the software out to the 1,000 computers and then like 40% of them wouldn't turn on right. And then we'd have to start going into the computers one by one, diagnosing what was going on. It was something that ended up taking weeks and weeks. That pain that I and others in the software engineering field were experiencing led to this really cool technology called Docker. And I think about Docker as like the Han Solo in Carbonite. Like you can take a computer that's been fully set up and just freeze it and make it portable. So if I want to build a 1,000 GPU system, I start one GPU computer, I design it exactly how I want, I freeze it, and now I have it as like a chess piece I can move around the board or like a Lego block. And again, this is like a modular and distributed paradigm for designing compute systems. And so yeah, Docker is just so beautiful, so helpful. And I got to tell you, with these agents, I am feeling that same pre-Docker pain. I believe we are in the moment before some new standard, a standard that is focused on the same type of portabilization, modularization of these agentic memory systems where we have a number of intelligences. We've identified what data, what training, what artifacts have to be attached to each intelligence to have the desired function. But how do we make that something that you can put anywhere you want, right? So that is like, I think actually something I haven't told you is going to be our next step is like we're going to build what I would call an agentic memory compiler that will take an agentic memory configuration that an expert has transferred into one of these systems and allow it to run on any agent framework. Could run on your local computer, could run on N8N. If your business ends up really taking off and you guys have to scale to millions of clients, like just push it to the data center kind of thing. So anyway, I just think that is really fun. And you guys, like machine learning is one of those topics where it's just hard for me to stop talking, especially when I'm caffeinated. So just thanks for being a little nonlinear with us today. But yeah, this new thing that's happening, interdisciplinary collaborative creation of agentic memory systems, integrating those things with business use cases. I literally don't think there's a more exciting topic on the world. I'm so proud of this like little community-driven agentic lab that we're growing here at the Kin. I got to say, I feel like it's such a Kin-coded thing that we're approaching it that way. It makes me pretty happy. And then quite frankly, like there's something I want to do with this agentic lab. I want to kick Y Combinator's butt. And listen, I am just kidding. Like I love Y Combinator. But what I mean though is I really think there is a dimension of these technologies where community and diversity is an advantage. It's not a pure advantage. We do have to work together sometimes, and it's not always easy. But it's like the agentic memory needs a piece from each pie to taste delicious. And so if we can not just like figure out how to go through this process of like partnering to create agentic memory, but we can do it in this Kin characteristic community-driven way, I think people are going to be talking about what we're doing, and this sort of diffusion of the agentic memory idea, getting back to being your friendly neighborhood scientist, like we could be a part of how people start to hear about this, and this idea that people are going to start hearing about, like, oh, they copied the knowledge of a doctor, and we don't need doctors anymore, right? Like when people start hearing about that, I want them also to be hearing about, we use this to improve the educational experience for children in LA. We use this to make sure that we're taking the best care of our health after the fires. I don't want it to just be a bad thing. It might be partially because my fiance is a bit of a Luddite, and so I'm like working real hard to convince her AI is not evil. But yeah, also convincing everybody, and I think that's something we can do together here in this community. And listen, like I'm an optimist. My grandpa, told me to be an optimist, but what he said is like optimism isn't a way you think the world is. It's a work ethic. It's like a posture you bring to the world, right? And so, as tough as things get, like there's exciting stuff to do, there's exciting stories to tell, and I don't think anything brings people in a good direction other than feeling like they're part of a story. So,
yeah, I think that's why having this happen here is so impactful, because the kin is so focused on impact, on businesses with impact, and I think Stanley just articulated that, how passionate he is, not just about building technology, but building technology that has a positive impact. And I think that's what maybe makes this unique and exciting from my perspective.
God, I was going to wrap up, but oh my God, you said something that makes me go like, man, is like, there is like such a failure of imagination that I'm seeing in the extended venture world. Because like everyone's trying to like get people hyped about what agents are going to do. And you see people talking about the one-person unicorn. The idea that the next Google is going to be just one person with a bunch of agents. And like, okay, that sounds cool. That's fine. You know what, though? I kind of feel like the tech ecosystem has already gotten really good at handing billions of dollars to people, like for questionable levels of value creation. Shouldn't have said that probably. I don't know that it needs to get better at that, though. I think it's already doing pretty good at that. But what about this? What about the next unicorn isn't just owned by one dude, but it helps kids succeed in education, right? Or it like endows a nonprofit that helps us save the ocean. Like, what if we open up our thinking with this new technology to solutions that, don't have to split the baby? Maybe that's the intention we want to set in the story we want to tell. We can have our cake and eat it too when it comes to doing good and doing well. So anyway, that's the future of agents that I want to be a part of. I think we can do it here, man. I really think we can. And then, again, please come to the kin on Sundays if you want to build some agents.
1 o'clock in that room right over there.
We got good vibes. We got good coffee. And then one last thing, and this is, Michael, maybe something should just kind of share in aspiration because there's some alignment to do. But yeah, this system up here, at a certain point will be available to kin members at something like agents.thekin.co. And one thing we're really excited about is like modulo, discussion, alignment. The kin has a pretty incredible system for keeping track of all the incredible members of the kin. And like one thing I've noticed about the kin is like if you're a kin member and there's another kin member who can help you out, like they're going to be so stoked to help you out. And so like I'm kind of excited about the idea of using agents to help us build this agentic lab, right? That's sort of like, if you have a thing for your business and you're looking for the right person, maybe, you can go onto the kin's agent system. It can help you find the right person, find the right resource. And, maybe like working together, we can figure out how to make that kind of a, community-driven intelligence like a real success story.
Right. Yeah, and I would just encourage any of you who are members of the kin to reach out and connect if you do need help. I'd sat down and had a conversation with Oliver about my desire to leverage AI, and before you know it, he's introducing me to Tali, to Stanley. It's just been incredible. The network here that Michael, that you guys are building is just an incredible group of people. So if you're not a member of the kin, I encourage you to talk to any of us who are about the experience here. Yes, I didn't even see you slip in. Yes. So anyway, thank you.
Listen, I think that's about it. I would be so happy to answer some questions. And then again, too, like, thank you guys so much for little non-linearity. I kind of really did just want to serve up a slice of what we do Sundays. I think this is pretty close, right? Yes, sir. Good to see you, my friend.
Hey, Stanley, you talked a lot about what you're doing. Could you talk a little bit about how to do it? Like pretend you're talking to a 3-year-old well, maybe I'm 5, but to a 5-year-old, and like step 1, step 2, step 3 to get even just the simplest result?
Oh my God, what a good question. And like,
Do you want me to start with my experience?
oh yeah, heck yeah, but
then
also
I'll
like
let
we
you
should do
chime
some
in. Yeah.
videos. We should do some kin videos. If there's a YouTube channel, like,
I think, Stanley, you mentioned earlier, step 1 is figuring out what do you need help with in your business? What do you want to automate? And then start mapping it out. What is your current process? And then come to the kin on Sunday, and these guys will help.
Well, give us an example.
I do like that one. I do like that one. Because yeah, I think actually it is a thing where literally like kind of there's a monkey see, monkey do, where if you're sitting down next to someone who feels comfortable, it just is much easier to get that moment of click. But high level, we're building based on a platform called N8N. Anyone familiar with like WordPress? So I mentioned there was a period of time that I think of as like one of the most significant moments in the history of literacy, when websites became a thing, when people started wanting to build websites and use them for different purposes. And it's kind of hard to understate what a big deal WordPress was. Like I think WordPress, right, like quite literally is understandable as like something analogous to the printing press, in the sense that like it was a technology that gave a very broad range of people the ability to create high quality websites that would allow them to participate in this. And exactly what it was about WordPress that made it the product that did that is a whole different question. In the agent space, N8N is the one product that really is like clicking like that for me. 2 months ago, it was like something called Rivet. Arson and I were building a really cool agent for Cedars-Sinai with a platform called Rivet. So, 2 months could be something different, but N8N seems to be building the product very well. They have very good financial footing as a company. And then there is a big community of people building these patterns, like sharing them. And then you're starting to see like a whole kind of consulting sector of people who are like, have identified in their area a high value use case, and they're just kind of building agents for people. So I definitely think like even if sort of like you're not gonna learn too many technical systems this year, like it is worth sitting down with N8N. N8N is not quite open source, but it's embarrassingly close. And so you can log into like a web-based N8N. I don't even think you have to pay to get like a trial account, and then you can start to kind of do this sort of drop a thing, open it up, configure it. I personally have a feeling that what you expressed, the sort of like specification of a business use case, should happen in parallel to the onboarding to the system. Because kind of like once you see the system and you get a sense of like what it works and what you can do, it kind of connects to your thinking about the process, right? Like, because even just for example, like if you're thinking about an employee you normally manage, right? And then kind of like, oh, how do I go through the whole process of ensuring quality in their work product? Well, you're kind of going like, oh, when do I check? When do I check? When do I check? Right? And then that goes into like, where do I put the nodes that ping the human on Slack when like we're, so.
The most obvious use case for us was something that our team, I have a team in the Philippines who's the staff accountant level, and they were doing a repeated process every month that was extremely time consuming, which was just copying data from one place to another and refreshing that data. So that was the first place that I thought, well, this can be automated, So if there's a pain point, something that's causing a lot of time, that's costing a lot of money, that you think that's repeatable, that's where you want to start.
No, I totally agree. And also like, looking at this N8N subreddit, you can find all kinds of people talking about it, which always helps me, right? I see in sort of the same cow from different directions is always really helpful. What was I going to say? Also have fun with it, because in addition to sort of like for example, this agent that Arson and I built for Cedars-Sinai breast oncology, I believe that it sort of removed 10 to 15 hours of work from the plate of like the busiest person I've ever met in my life, which is great, right? But there's another level of like using agents as a tool as like an organizational leader that I think even gets more interesting, because it's sort of like not about a particular agent as a particular tool, but the idea of being able to create agents as a tool that can be something you think of when you encounter a problem. I am a coder. I also have like a hand disability, so I'm very specific about like the way that I interact with my code environment. I sort of have to be. But in general, software engineers who are part of performance-driven organizations kind of have to be pretty specific about how they interact with their computers. So here's something that like is a big part of like my hygiene as a coder. I don't use the mouse. Anytime my hand leaves the keyboard is like lost time and is a distraction from the code that I should be looking at. So like anything that I have to do with my mouse more than twice, I write like some code that does it and I create a key command that does it, right? So it's like those little things are relatively small, but then it all adds up to like I never have to move my hands off the keyboard. When I'm producing code, my fingers are always moving. I'm never getting distracted. I can lock in fully. Now, think about that on this organizational level, right? Where like it isn't just like you logged into N8N, you built kind of a first fun thing, you maybe got 5 hours off your plate, but like as new challenges occur, as new processes occur, you know, this is a thing where like when something gets to be repetitive and painful, you're like, oh, we got this, right? And then again, it's almost like outside of what you're going to accomplish, outside of that capability, anyone like Waymo? Oh, I love Waymo. Oh my God, I love Waymo. One of the reasons I love Waymo is like I hate Uber. I hate Uber. I've had lots of fine Uber drivers. I've had a couple Uber drivers where it was like, oh my God, I can't believe how bad that was, you know? And it just sort of creates a vibe where it's just sort of like, if I'm like, oh, I would love to go out to the bookstore, but then there's like, you know, I don't know what's going to happen, but there's that like percentage of like, oh God, what if I have one of those drivers? And it's just kind of like, this comes up, I think, a lot in our work and in our tasks, right? Like even if it's like subconscious in a way that we're not aware of, like we're sort of like, oh, if I have to go do that, that's going to be really hard and annoying and like painful. And so, you know, there's all these places where like that kind of guides us and directs us. And like, you know, what about when you get to a place where you have full confidence that anything like that you encounter, you're just going to go grab an agent that someone built and the agent's going to do it? Like how is that going to change how we think about what's possible, right? That's fun stuff.
Hey, thanks for the time today. My question is basically to your point on modularity. From a software architecture perspective, how do you think about strategizing a moat around agents when they're getting implemented across the entire tech stack from like hardware to the OS to the apps? And then just some background for context. I used to be a high school baseball coach, and then I pivoted, went back to school, got a master's in computer science, and I just released an app earlier this year on iOS and Android called Baseball AI. It's meant to drive down the cost of private lessons, so it aligns with your impact point. But yeah, I'm thinking about these things and trying to like not get over implemented by like the operating systems that I'm building on. So just curious in your perspective.
That's a great question. You know, and it's like we're seeing kind of the writing on the wall about model commoditization, right? Like we had a stock market crash because someone trained a model for cheap. Remember DeepSeek R1, right? And yeah, it's just kind of like such a moment where things are changing really fast. It's kind of hard to see like the economy we're moving towards right now. To me, there's a little bit of an elephant in the room that like, I don't think the economy we have is going to work once all this is like out there. You know, hey, I'm running for governor on the 3-day work week platform. And I'm kidding, but like sincerely, like there are going to be changes to the amount of labor that's needed to create wealth. And it's going to be great. Like we're going to have much more wealth for way less labor. But is there any single person in this room who would say that like as a people we have been good about sharing? I love that I got a literal bark there because like that is the appropriate response because yeah, I think we all need to get sent back to kindergarten to learn sharing. You know, and again though, I think that like sometimes you know, it's paradoxical that the people who wind up in charge of capital end up being there sometimes downstream of being people who don't feel a lot of trust with many other people. And I think that it is a really interesting moment where we can set these goals that are kind of good for everybody and try to tell that story and like, try to show everybody that this pie is going to be yummy for everyone. But no, it's like kind of like, I feel like your question does have to kind of come back from like we will probably need to start talking about basic income soon. We will probably need to start talking about reducing the work week soon. I think we're going to have to start thinking about how the data that we create just by living our lives is what is at the core of the value in these systems. And bring up a project I worked on. I feel very proud about this project as a kind of thought experiment for how I see these things playing out. This was the Stanford Rare Disease AI Hackathon that I architected. So I was associated with a really cool program at Stanford that was about edge technology for patients who've exhausted course of care. So we were typically working with like rare disease patients where there's no course of care, or oncology patients who'd completely exhausted course of care. So kind of like an interesting patient population. I mean, obviously like on an emotional level, like so high impact, like an honor to work with these kind of patients. But it's also kind of like as the laboratory of medicine, these are the places we're trying the most extreme things and sort of like, getting to see how things come together. So it was kind of cool. We wanted to kind of understand, and this was like 2 years ago or something, like so this was pretty early in the story, how these systems were going to impact medicine. And then, we had this population of patients who were just drastically underserved, right? So we have much less risk of doing harm by like lowering standard of care because the standard of care was already almost zero. Here's kind of a fun, silly little thing. You guys know Greg Brockman, the co-founder of OpenAI? And I would say like Sam Altman's the co-founder. Greg Brockman's the founder. I'm just kidding. I'm just Greg Brockman, though, technically, like just not a smarter machine learning engineer. But anyway, this was a tweet that he actually put out 2 days before our hackathon demo day, which was at the GitHub headquarters. And he actually was sharing that his wife had the disease we were working on, a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that I've been quite focused on for a few years. And, he shares here that just like even, the wife of one of the most famous business executives in the world had like a 5-year journey before she could get a diagnosis. And, that's like, that's how bad our medical system is for rare disease patients. So anyway, building a bridge, again, like getting to this idea of like there's knowledge in human minds that we can kind of build into a portable modular system, to your question, right? But then again, it's like, I had a very fun joke that I used a lot for this hackathon. If you want to be a doctor, you have to have good bedside manner. But if you want to be a machine learning scientist who works with doctors, you have to have really good. And again, though, it's just because like doctors want to be directing, and it, well that they should. They've worked hard. They know their stuff. So there's a very humble posture. There's a respectful posture. But yeah, there's also stuff where like we need to create the structure. Like we have to create the thing that you tune, and we have to work together to understand the pieces. So. Yeah, I just thought this was such a fun project and such a cool project. And then this is kind of what it looked like, right? So we had many different projects. And then we had a very big population of doctors who were evaluating the models and the agents and the systems that were built. Anyone ever spend any time on Chatbot Arena? Anyone? Do yourself a favor, you will enjoy this. Chatbot Arena is probably like the most trusted sources of benchmarks and validation for machine learning models. It's literally an arena between chatbots where you are the judge. You go to this thing, you ask it a question, 2 models from the total zoology of machine learning models are selected, and you see their answers and you pick which one had the better answer. Anyone a chess player? Anyone know what is ELO? Does anyone know what ELO is?
Ranking. Your score, your ranking.
Yeah. So like, what's the Grandmaster? Is the Grandmaster like 2,400?
Something right around that.
Yeah. So how does that work though? When you play a person in chess, if your ranking is much higher than theirs and you win, your ranking only goes up a little bit because that was expected. If your ranking is much higher than someone and you lose, your ranking goes down a lot because that was not expected. So the ELO system is a statistical system for taking a place where a bunch of things are competing in one-offs where there's a clear winner or loser, and assigning to them a statistical fitness value. So that is the best and most trusted set of benchmarks for machine learning systems. And we basically recreated it in the medical use case. And it was pretty fun because we actually found that there were quite a few tweaks we had to make to the way the points were allocated. But we were able to do this. And so we had our teams kind of enter the funnel over here and submit an agent or an LLM that they thought had reached a level of performance for a use case. And then, we had a thing where our doctors could log in and be asking these models questions and, telling them yes, telling them no. And then we were fully tracking the entire agentic memory configuration of the system. So basically, for each of these models, we would get this fitness score for how good a thing it was. And then we also had a list of all the memory artifacts that went in there. So what we could do is over time, keep going through this loop. And we would change the artifacts, see if the scores went up, see if the scores went down. And over time, we actually learned how to best configure those memory objects. And actually kind of a cool, kind of a fun process. And, again, one that is definitely needs engineers, but then a lot of the knowledge isn't engineering knowledge. Because, just for example, we were training AI to be able to talk about this condition, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But then we found that it was too nerdy. When we fed it just the science papers, it started speaking in this way. It lost its bedside manner. Yeah. So what we did is we actually found this other data set called the Pile data set. And the Pile data set is just friendly language. It's just you read it and you're oh, that's so sweet. You know what I mean? So it's just sort of we were able to mix in a little bedside manner with that data set. So yeah, this is just very interesting. And then again, it's here's the question. So we go through this process. All of these doctors, patients, all of the creators of the data we used, all of that kind of comes together in this system. At the end, we get this thing that I'm calling an agentic memory configuration, right? So it's an inventory of data sets and objects that allow the thing to happen. And listen, we got a complicated problem, right? There's a lot of stakeholders who contributed to the creation of that. And again, I think we need to start working on a new economic model, right? Because we need a system where people are incentivized to create valuable agents, where they feel that they can contribute their slice of the pie and have a stake and have remuneration. So I don't know that I know all the answers, and I think more than anything, I'm excited to kind of be here, telling the story about how these things are built, so that in addition to building them, we can start thinking about these broader questions. Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty cool sci-fi novel to be living in, isn't it?
All right. We actually have to wrap up, but I wanted to say thank you to Stanley and Ashley. What an amazing talk, and thank you so much for bringing all this value here today.